Hey there, Ninja. Today we're going to talk about how to make spaghetti squash in a microwave. It's super easy, and it's also a really fabulous tip if you're trying to cut carbs out of your diet, right? Carbs have become a bad guy lately. It's kind of a bummer. But reality is that eating too many carbs, like eating too many or too much of something else, like is just bad for us. So, as a society, we're starting to cut back on our carbs a little bit for health reasons, and it's really a good idea. So one way that you can cut back on your carbs while not decreasing your amount of like life and food satisfaction is by eating spaghetti squash. And a spaghetti squash is basically like a, big winter squash, big-ish winter squash. And what you do is you cook it, and then the inside strands of the squash, if you use a fork, you can scrape them out, and they essentially make noodles. And it's pretty cool, and they're pretty tasty. They're also relatively low carb, super healthy because they're a vegetable, and you can put anything you want on them. Like I like putting pesto or spaghetti sauce. Like I have a really great meat sauce that I make that goes great, great, great on spaghetti squash. You can turn them into a pasta salad. You can kind of do whatever you want with them. So you can take any pasta dish that you really love that uses like long strand pasta noodles like spaghetti or fettuccine or something along those lines, and then just use spaghetti squash instead. Now, spaghetti squash is super easy to make. You can make it in the oven. It takes anywhere from like 20 minutes to 40 minutes, depending on the size of your spaghetti squash. But it's really easy to make it in the microwave. And the reason why this is such a great tip is because if you've had a long ass day and you get home at the end of the day, you're like, I just want to lay on the couch with a glass of wine and Netflix. I do not want to make dinner. The last thing you want to do is, have to cut up a squash and throw it in the oven and wait for it to cook for like 40 minutes. It's a pain in the butt. But with a microwave, you can actually nuke your spaghetti squash super fast. And so there's a couple different ways to do it. You can cut your squash in half the long way. You can cut your squash into slices, or you can microwave it whole. I find that if you cut it the long ways, like the long way across a squash, the noodles aren't as long and like spaghetti-like because the noodles actually go around the squash in a circle. So if you cut it in half the long way, you're basically cutting all the noodles in half. So what I like to do is cut the spaghetti squash into like 3-inch slices and microwave them that way. And what you do basically is you wash the spaghetti squash, scrub it down, dry it off, and then you cut off the very, very ends, just like the 1/2 inch off the ends, and then you cut the spaghetti squash into like 3-inch slices, and then you put them in the microwave. You put them on a plate or some sort of microwave-proof dish, and then you put them on full power for like a minute, or actually 2 minutes. Let's say 2 minutes. And then what you do is you take them out and you look them over and you kind of poke them with a fork a little bit and you run the fork across the flesh and see how soft it is. Odds are it's not going to be done yet, but the goal is to take it a little bit slowly because you don't want to overcook your squash. If your squash isn't done yet, you just flip over the slices, put them back in the microwave for another 2 minutes. And then after, because they've been sliced into 3-inch slices, like anywhere from like 4 to 5 to 6 minutes max should be how much time it takes to cook them. And again, you take a fork, you pierce the squash with a fork, and the squash should pierce really easily with the fork. And if you scrape the fork along the inside of the slice and the circle part, it should actually just like shred off into noodles, and you'll know it's done. Now, if you want to do a spaghetti squash whole in the microwave, that's super easy as well. But the key, and there's a safety concern here, is you need to pierce the squash all over with a knife, like full on like Freddy Krueger style, like because what happens if you try to nuke a whole squash without piercing it, you give the moisture in the middle of the squash no way to escape, and your squash could potentially explode, which is a bad thing. And even if it doesn't explode, if you do cut it open, like that steam's going to escape very quickly when those first couple knife cuts, and it's potentially going to burn you with a steam burn, which is also mega no bueno. So what you want to do is you want to take your squash, you want to like stab it all over with a paring knife, like a really sharp paring knife. And you want to stab it probably 20 to 30 times. And you want to make sure that the knife goes all the way through you have your knife and then you have the handle. So make sure the knife is submerged into the squash all the way up to the handle of the knife. That's how you know that the handle is reaching the middle of the squash. And then you just throw it in the microwave and you microwave it on high for anywhere from 10 to 15 minutes, depending on how big your squash is, and voila, your squash is done. Then what you do is you just cut it in half, you scrape out all the seeds, and you shred it into pasta. That's it. If you have any questions, go ahead and drop them below. Somewhere on this page, you will find either the tutorial that you can print or a link to a tutorial you can print. That tutorial is located on fearlessfresh.com, and that is the place to go if you want to become a faster, more creative, more efficient home cook and have a hell of a lot of fun doing it. Thanks so much. Have a good one.